think given that we're a couple minutes past 2, we've got lots to get through. We'll crack on, and we may have a couple more people join us, but if not, that's not a problem, because I think what we found with a lot of our community events, we have large scale ones and small scale ones, and sometimes the smallest groups are actually the most valuable discussions and engaging conversations. So delighted to have you all with us. Thank you for joining, and delighted to welcome K&A with us today, and excited to dive into today's session, which is Ready for the US: Expert Insights to Navigate Expansion with Confidence. So this is the first of what we are hoping will be a series of webinars with K&A. And similar to all of our kind of other webinars across our Scale program, designed to help you and your senior teams help navigate, the challenges of scaling business, and in this instance, looking at scaling internationally and focusing on the US in this session. So I can see that I think a fair few of you have your cameras on. Please do, if I can encourage you to turn them on, please do have them on. Please do engage, ask questions. We're hoping this will be a really, really interactive session. I think the basis for this webinar came from a workshop that we ran with K&A in New York last month, which had really positive feedback. So we were keen to run a session that built on the foundations of that workshop for those that weren't able to make it to New York. So yeah, without further ado, I will pass over to Mike.
Thanks very much, Sophie. And, since it is such a small group, Ian and Rob, can we just get 3 minutes of your company, et cetera, and then, we'll be in context a little bit.
Mike, just so you know, there are more people. You probably just can't see them on your screen as it's showing at the moment.
All right. So I'll just crack on. My name is Mike Kelly, and along with Tom Newman and Katie Sosmowski, we're Kelly Newman Advisors. We're investor advisors in the United States. We've had a relationship with BGF now for about 10, 12 years. At first co-investing and helping portfolio companies scale in the United States. In the last 5 or 6 years, we've been operating partners with BGF, where we help their portfolio companies as advisors, as board directors, as co-investors, to scale in the United States. And so over the years, we've developed a bit of a playbook on how to do this. Not that it's consistent, because obviously with politics and with trade, et cetera, it changes all the time. But there is a commonality across all the companies we've seen. And I don't know, Tom can weigh in. We've probably talked to 200 companies over the last few years who want to expand to the United States, and dozens who have, and a few that have really hit it out of the park. So what we tried to do is focus on the ingredients of success. And we did have, as Sophie said, a workshop in New York. It's our second workshop. Last year, I would say, was kind of a pilot. This year, we really had a terrific, very engaging group. And it goes beyond just what you're going to see today. But unlike most webinars where everything is live and there's panels, et cetera, these are highlights, if you will, of the day that we had in New York on October 15th. And we've tried to isolate, key players that would help you to make your decision on expanding to the United States and or not really. And we hope that, you find it beneficial and insightful. We've lined up founders who, when they put their business together, had a notion that they wanted to scale in the United States, and then have done so very successfully. And so we get a founder's view, and then we're going to start off with that, which I think is quite insightful. And then we're going to move into sort of a company. We're going to hear from an executive who works at a company called Teads, but he was an executive at a company called Unruly, where I was the chair. Unruly was purchased by News Corp, had to kind of move a lot of its operations to the United States to prove its worth and get the earnout, to be frank. And Craig was the chap who did that. And so we're going to hear from Craig Hughes, who will take you through sort of the trials and tribulations of scaling here once you're here. And then Talent is always a very meaty topic when it comes to the conversations Tom and I have. It often revolves around talent. Sophie can attest to that. And so we lined up a terrific executive search firm CEO to take you through the difference between US comp and UK comp and talent. And then finally, the thing that dominates our world today is AI. We have Paul Monk, who's a partner at Alpha Consulting, where they have done incredible work with AI and how AI is being deployed in the United States, kind of sets the landscape of what is going on here to have you better prepared. So as we start, I think the overarching theme is that if you're going to expand into the U.S., do it with purpose. And I know that sounds obvious, but we've seen plenty of companies that have not done that, where it's sort of been an expansion move, not a deliberate strategic move. And if you do it with purpose, it takes a lot of the pressure off. And so here we're going to get into real-time inserts real world insights into approaching the U.S. market confidently. The other thing I'll say as we get into this is we really do want to make it interactive. So raise your hand, and we'll note that and get into it. We're going to pause during sort of after each presentation to have a bit of a chat. So please interact and use the chat box if you want to log things in as we go. Does that make sense to everyone? Should we crack on?
Yeah.
Okay, so what we found over the years is that the expansion really is a bit of a test of your readiness to expand. So I know that sounds like a closed loop conversation, but it's not just sort of a curiosity. I wonder how we're going to do in the United States. Now, none of the companies on this call, I'm sure, would ever approach it that way, but some companies do. They'll send someone over to the States to test the market, and sometimes that works. Most times that's not enough. So really, expansion in the United States is a test of your readiness, and getting to readiness is an important element to some of the things we talk to companies about. But it's something in your strategy sessions, et cetera, you should really tick through the various elements of your business that would make you ready for the United States. Hopefully, some of the things we're going to talk about today will tee up some of those questions. And we'll start with Amy Williams and Corbin Munnock, both founder CEOs of UK companies. Slide is a mobile marketing, mobile advertising company that is backed by BGF. Goodloop is not a BGF company. Amy Williams is the founder and CEO. Both of them started in the UK. Both of them have developed hugely successful businesses in the United States with very large US companies as customers and lots of competition. And so they're going to take us through how they do that. And we've got, as I said, this was live in New York. So these are video excerpts, and look at it as kind of like a highlight reel, and let's comment when they're done.
We started B2C in the UK, which was incredibly difficult. Acquisition's very expensive and churn's very high. So very quickly pivoted to an OEM mobile network operator distribution model. We did some PR at Mobile World Congress, which was PR. You pay for it, you get it. We actually got some MVNOs in the United States reaching out saying really wanted to tech the entrepreneurial spirit, incredibly present and prominent. The US has led the internet market because of that attitude. If you're working in tech, if you take entrepreneurial know-how and risk-taking and you combine it with the size of the market, then you've got to be here.
Ad market, one of the fundamental truths is there's more people here buying stuff. 350 million people is a massive market, and it is dominant in terms of the culture that's set in our industry. Corporate donations in the UK are around 1.6 million, and in the US it's 44 billion. We found fantastic product market fit. Our first approach was to take our UK clients and bridge into the US. It didn't work. It didn't work once. And I was actually so shocked by that. Still to this day, No American cares about the work we're doing in the UK. We had to start from a ground zero. In the US, after about a year of fighting it, I leaned into it because the niche is still huge. The opportunity is so big here that it's a dangerous distraction. We stopped going to Advertising Week New York and started going to Sustainable Brand San Diego. And we got way more from carefully targeting at a niche level within our sector.
Money talks in the United States. If you're a new business and they're going to take a bet on you, they want to know what the opportunity is. So don't be English about it. Just tell them how much money you're going to make.
I've had to change our sales pitch. We give a donation with every view, which means you get 2.5 times higher engagement. Repeat rate on US clients was extremely low. Like, that was the strategic trigger to move, what you need to get in place to make the US successful, making yourself redundant in that team by hiring senior people, empowering your people by just making sure others are lifted, having a strategy there, while simultaneously thinking intentionally about my network in America. I found Mandy, she just left Twitter, global sales lead for Twitter. She knew every big brand in America. So I snapped her up and she basically marched me around town for my first 3 months. I made sure that we won an award that first 3 months. When she's marched me around town, she's opening the door and going, have you met Amy? They're the winner of most innovative blah, blah, blah. It really helped me land with a bang and it really helped people to get that buzz that I think matters in this market. People notice who you're introduced by and who you're connected with on LinkedIn. And those things are signals of they're worth your time.
This is a market where you don't ask permission if you want to be successful. You just do it. And then you ask permission later from the various stakeholders who might be mad. The end justifies the means much more than playing by the rules.
Resilience, repetition, and reminder that's where the cash is. Basically gets you what you want.
Immediately upon landing, my philosophy was get back on the plane as much as possible. New York's where I live because it's fun and I wanted to live here, not because this is where our clients are. I'm going to Dallas to see Lay's and Toyota. I'm going to Minneapolis to see Mars. That is the reality of doing business here.
Figure out your conference circuit, have 4 to 6 conferences a year. Everybody goes to those conferences and they're willing to do business, and then take a week after that conference to meet everyone. Conference circuit's been amazing for us.
It's gotten very hard to do business in the United States. COVID, people just switched off their usual thing. So B2B sales are really hard today. Conferences in your category where your customers are the best and maybe only way. I would say it's also a mission-driven culture. So I'd much rather work for a company with a mission than some soul-sucking thing. And as a founder, setting that mission and that vision can really get you extraordinary people. Now, the other cultural disconnect is equity culture. Here, equity is seen as the cheapest way that you can pay somebody. But in the UK, it's very protected and not distributed. That's one of those things that's been changing over time as more US executives have gone to work for UK companies, but it's definitely a thing. And the battles I've fought as a board director and as a chair, trying to recruit US executives and put the right kind of equity on the table has been epic.
So we'll pause there for a second. And I'll just add a few things because it's tough just to see the highlight reel. So Amy's business is an advertising technology business that if you're a brand, you advertise on her platform, a portion of the ad revenue you spend goes to a charity of your choice, etc. She's built a really big business around this. And then Corbin's business is a mobile app business that deals directly with the mobile carriers and not through the App Store. So his business development is with T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T, some of the biggest players in the let's get out of this thing. Some of the biggest players in the U.S. market, tough competition in each one of these sectors. And so one of the things they talked about is the size of the market. And so, yeah, it seems obvious, the U.S. is big, et cetera. But the difference in scale, I think Amy really pointed it out with corporate giving. In the US, it's 44 billion. In the UK, it's obviously much smaller than that. It just gave her a much bigger playing field. But in addition to that, it's relevance, because when you're selling into a huge market like that, there's a lot to go around. The other thing I think that they touched on, which I think is really important, and for Corbin, I mean, it was obvious he had been dealing with smaller MVNOs. He said sort of smaller networks that were virtual, not really um, uh, the big platforms like T-Mobile, et cetera. And he realized in order to get into those, he had to really make a commitment to it because it was so vast, and he'd be going and selling against Google and Microsoft and others. So the size of the market is huge, but also understanding it in context, I think, is really important. The second thing they touched on, which I think, of course, and this might sound a little self-serving, but it's finding an executive, either an executive you hire or a board director or a mentor, someone that can really help you to penetrate the market more quickly, because it's a relationship market like it is everywhere. But here, because there's a lot of competition for those relationships, finding an executive, finding a board director, finding someone, an advisor that you pull into your business is a critical step. And it's one of those things where if you get it right, it really can hasten, or not hasten, but can accelerate your success. The third thing I think is really important that they touched on is the commitment to the market. Amy full out moved here. I met Amy when she had one employee, and she was kind of in a basement shared space in London with a lot of dreams and a lot of hopes. She had a great mission, and when she explained that mission to people, they really loved it, and wanted to be part of it. But it was very hard because she was in London, small scale, and most of the people that she wanted to get to go on this mission with her were in the United States. So she decided, I'm moving to the United States. And that gave her credibility with her customers, and also with the people that she was recruiting to join her on this mission. And it's a commitment, now her stage of life, she decided that's what she wanted to do. And it can't always be possible for the founder to move, but it's important then to send, in terms of, and you'll see later with Craig's discussion, to send someone senior in your organization who has credibility and authority within your organization, where people in your company are used to paying attention to what they have to say. And that usually is a senior executive, a co-founder, or someone like that. We've seen it time and time again where that is the key to success. Corbin didn't move here, but he spent a significant amount of time in the States. They early on, they rented an apartment in the Village. He and his co-founder would kind of trade off on their time in the United States. And he just has a mentality. He's on a plane in a moment's notice. His biggest customer is in the Pacific Northwest, 3,000 miles away from New York. But he's there when they need him. And that kind of persistence has really worked, that visibility. And the other thing we touched on a little bit is compensation. We're going to get into that a little more deeply with Luke Niho and his presentation. But it's a different market, and people do things for different reasons here. It's been my experience after many, many years of working with UK and US companies. Equity upside is a key motivator, especially for the most ambitious employees. They want to know if they hit a home run that everybody's going to be celebrating, and they're going to, frankly, have a great outcome. And so you have to be willing, I think, to think a little differently about how you share the equity in your company, but we'll get into that in a minute. So I'll pause there. Any questions or thoughts? You want to go deeper on anything that these guys covered?
When we get to the bit on remuneration, could you also just kind of cover off what kind of the American job market is looking for from, say, a UK employer, and how that's different? So not necessarily just the pounds and the pence, but how they would view it, the kind of both the cultural differences, the way that kind of maybe like appraisals work, things like that. What should we think about to get the most success out of our US employees if we go down that route?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Craig, when Craig talks, you'll see he gets deep into that for sure, and also Luke. And so we'll get into that in a second, but it's a very good question.
Hey, Mike, can I just take a shot at contrasting them, if I could? Because I think that Corbin and Amy had two different strategies around talent. I think that Amy, and we see this among companies, that some kind of who are coming into the US going all in on the talent, hiring here. And then Ian, I think your question is really relevant. And then others like Corbin feel like the arbitrage really helps. In other words, keeping employees in London, or in the UK, and the salaries are obviously lower, and being able to service your clients well in the US. And so there's two different mindsets. Both of them work in different situations. I think that Corbin talks a lot about how he hops on a plane. Mike was saying he makes sure that the employees are working the same hours as the customers. Obviously, that the cultural training and fit is there. So those are the two approaches, and that was one of the things that was very interesting about their conversation / debate, is how they approached talent in the US.
Great. Anything else? Okay, so I think the summary there is sort of like what does readiness look like for you and for your company, and how will you attack this huge opportunity in the United States, and why now, who leads, and how will you adapt? And so to answer some of those questions on sort of talent, transition, timing, we asked Craig Hughes, who's the EVP at Teads, to take us through his experience. Craig was a senior person at a company called Unruly. I was the chair of Unruly, which we sold to News Corp. It was a BGF-backed company. There was a significant earnout. A third of the consideration was based on performance. And very quickly after the acquisition, their US operations started to slide a little bit. This is where their acquirer was and all the acquirer's executives. So it was incredibly important to get it right. Craig was a high potential employee at the time, a VP running business development. And so they asked Craig to go over and team up with the US operations to try to, quote unquote, turn things around a little bit. And so he tells his story.
Everyone here is already sold on the idea that it's important to crack the US. Every hour spent nailing the US yields 5 to 10x the return of an hour spent on any other market. There's just like a different scale and a different arc of economic capacity. Selling here is different to selling in the UK. The challenges or the mistakes tend to fall into 3 categories. Talent. Who should do this? How should we help them do it? At what cost should we allow this to rise up to? Translation, meaning how do we make this thing that we know is working over here? How do we translate that to work over here? Deliberately using translate, not transform. Again, we need to have some roots back to what has made us special. We can't just start from scratch here, but translation. How do we adapt this? Who do we adapt it for? Where do we adapt it for? Even in the US, single market. I think someone was saying, a big difference between New York and Charlotte, and even verticals within those. And then timing. And so when you zoom in, the success that had led to the point of the acquisition had been very much predicated on winning within 2 key markets, which are the UK and Germany. But to achieve the outcomes required to deliver on the earnout, really depended on actually nailing the US, like the scale required, and also some of the terms of the earnout required as to help News Corp succeed. The challenge was, though, you can't easily just quickly reverse certain fundamentals about where you are specializing, the decisions that you've made that led to getting to a certain point. So the first year after the acquisition was especially challenging. And so we had to acknowledge a ton of different, I guess, mistakes. If we were to view it through the lens of how do we crack the US, certain mistakes were made, largely under the assumption that 2 things were true. A, we could handle getting this right remotely, meaning founders over many years doing this from London, essentially. The assumption led to us believing just another market, roll out the same playbook. So it's a classic translation error. It's actually a failure to translate. The markets that were doing well, such as Germany and Southeast Asia, had developed their own playbooks relative to those markets. even if it wasn't immediately visible to everybody in London. So if product development is in London, if R&D is in London, if leadership is in London, then two challenges emerge that we experienced to a deep degree. Number one, if needs emerge for the US market, it's hard for that team, because they were hired in the US and are not fully integrated with the home country, to influence the product roadmap, to influence system designs, whatever it might be. It's hard for them because they haven't built the trust, relationships, and ability to do that. And secondarily, the US, living on a bit of an island, started to drift from a cultural point of view. So the things that made us special in the UK, the hustle, the creativity, the really embedding ourselves with different parts of the ecosystem, wasn't happening to the same degree. Core culture topic, it requires people to be in and amongst the team in the US, or it requires bringing the US team home on a frequent basis to really infuse and kind of meet in the middle on the cultures. And especially getting the right people in is in itself a late stage talent problem. It's easier to get the right people in if the founders and leaders are on the ground there themselves and are able to feel the market. The highest impact thing by such a long distance was the founder and C-level relocation, like by a very long distance. British companies that achieve valuations of $1 billion or more in their life cycle, 86% of them had a founder move to the US. Relocation is almost non-negotiable. Doesn't necessarily have to literally be the CEO or a founder, but if it's not a tenured executive with deep connectivity to home base and all the infrastructure necessary to execute whatever translation is needed, it just isn't going to work. It's extremely hard as an executive and founder for someone to tell you from another country without you seeing it for yourself, it doesn't work like that here. It's really hard to internalize it. Like, you know, objectively, they're probably right about it, but equally, it's wildly frustrating. They're the only country that's not working. Like, it works here, it works there. And you need to see it through your own eyes. As unfortunate as that is, we're humans, and that is just how we operate. So relocation of senior and long tenured founder or exec, ideally, it just massively changes the game on how effective and fast decision making can be. It allows for very rapid network building, which is massively critical when you're talking about hire and fire. It builds that cultural fluency. And then, as we said, the internal connectivity and culture is just such a critical part of it, if we accept that we have to translate a little bit.
So, you know, I think Craig's major point there was executive presence in the US market and how critical it is. And he put that statistic up, which, you know, I'm not 100% sure where to source that statistic, but it sounds right to us. And I think, you know, the other the folks on the call can attest to this. It's also about you know, your business plan executing in the United States and being different. So Alex Snodgrass, who's partner at BGF and obviously a co-presenter this morning, you know, we spend a lot of time talking about companies that are saying US is part of their business model. To really source that out, are they going to treat the US as another just another country? You know, let's say they're in 10 markets. Do they look at the US as just another market, or do they look at it uniquely? And I know we Americans think that we're exceptional, but it is by far, in most categories, a much bigger market than any place else that you'll do business. And so it requires really thinking a little bit differently. Alex, when you say that's like a key determinant of success, is if the portfolio company or the company you're looking at being a portfolio company thinks about the US expansion as less of a geographic expansion and more as a real strategic move?
Yeah, I think so. I think reflecting on a current example of my portfolio companies that you've helped, when they expanded into the US, it was a little bit like this is one territory, and then the nuances in terms of their offering into the east and west coast, the secondary cities, I guess how can they find their niche? How can they make what they're good at in the UK resonate? And it has taken them a little bit of time. They did target secondary cities. They did target Atlanta as a state, again, because they had some critical mass and clients they could build around. that's really motoring now. And actually, they have tweaked their model. They have tweaked their go-to-market, but it's really starting to resonate now. They've properly understood what the client wants in that territory. So it's quite a nuanced piece about how do you get around the kind of translation error point that Craig mentioned in his video. But equally, talent's been a quite interesting challenge, just to make sure we've got the right people on the ground. And equally, some of the points that Craig mentioned really resonate in terms of how do we get the culture that's sat in the UK and make it work in the US and make it still the same organization, but a different type of playbook.
Yeah, absolutely. This idea, it's about the talent for sure, getting the right people in the US. I can tell you firsthand with Unruly, we had a couple of big misfires at first until we found what we thought was the right person. And then even that didn't translate completely. And so Craig went over. And then this translation, I think it's like, don't just copy what you're doing in the UK. You have to translate into the US. And then timing, like when is the right time to do it?
Sorry, Mike, can I ask a question?
Sure. Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to try and put my hand up, but I can't work out how to do it, which I assume is my incompetence rather than anything else. But it was I just thought I'd jump in. So when you talk about that kind of translation bit, should we think about it as being just a different route to market? So we've got to change kind of the pricing structure or the way the product's promoted, all that sort of stuff. Or should we think about the US almost as an entirely different business? So it's almost a startup really under our kind of group umbrella. Which is closer to the truth?
Well, that's a really good question. I think a lot depends on your business model. But what we found is that if you just try to say, well, this is what works here, and of course it's going to work in the US market, that's only the beginning. You have to really do your homework. I mean, one of the things that Tom and I spend a lot of time with, and Katie Sosmosky, who's our head of marketing, spends time with potential or current BGF companies that want to expand here, is on what those differences are in terms of translation. But it really depends on the category you're talking about. And you have to do your homework, just like you do everywhere else. It's just the stakes are a little bit higher. And I'll be honest, I think you can make more mistakes because it is such a big market. You can try things with companies and be a little take more risks because the risk reward is huge, and you're not going to permanently affect your business if you get it wrong. And so here I think it's a good thing. Like this is what Craig outlined is the translation, not not just copying. So where a UK company might think we're a trusted leading organization across Europe, driving growth, it changes to kind of driving growth for the world's boldest brands. There's a different way of approaching the market because the companies that you're talking to usually are big themselves. And so they want to know that if they work with you, it's going to be a scaled solution.
Hey, Mike, I just adding to that, I think Amy had said something early on that addresses Ian's point, which we wholeheartedly agree, which is it's not really a startup, I would say. It's really narrowing your focus. And these are generalizations, so it's not always true. But what Amy was saying is, the niche she was looking at in the US, that niche is big. And so, where in the UK and Ireland, she was kind of going wide. What we find is that early on, if you're coming over here, going narrow is more helpful, especially at the beginning, because even a narrow product market it is usually much bigger than the TAM in the UK and Ireland. So that's kind of what she found, so she's looking and saying, oh, wow, in my niche, which is going for her case, it's going for the sort of diversity or inclusion budgets. And even though those are much smaller than the larger budgets, they were still in the billions in the US. so she could narrow her focus, and we see that a lot. So just working, and we work with companies on that, which is kind of take what's best about you and see if you can narrow it to be known for that. And of course, then you what we call land and expand. It's not that you stay niche forever. You can expand on that, but it's good to be known for something quite limited and take that reputation across the country.
Got it. So really being quite sort of self-critical on picking your battles.
Yeah, I
Correct.
mean, if there's like one mistake that we see often, it's that the UK and Irish companies tend to be broader, and in the US, you got to have a tip of the spear and be like, this is what we do, because even the small category is going to be very crowded here. So that's oftentimes the very first work we do is become famous in a very specific category. It's often your kind of home turf. But making sure that you don't say and we do all this, because that will go that will just dissolve in the noise of this big market.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I think a really good example of that is another BGF portfolio company, which is now a public company called Dynomi, where I'm still the chair and was a co-investor with BGF many years ago, and we took them public. They're a native ad platform for financial services marketers. And so they kind of ran out of customers, to be honest, in the UK. And they started thinking, okay, well, maybe we need to take our platform to adjacent markets instead of, in addition to finance. But then they opened in the United States, and it's like we still have lots of opportunity to go because it's just such a different market. There are hundreds of potential customers here where they had kind of seen the end of the road in the UK. So yeah, as Tom said, don't think adjacent, think how do I drive into my niche, because the niche is going to be huge here, and a big opportunity. And then later, if you're successful in that, later then think adjacent. Move on. So this is a meaty topic. Luke Nihil is the founder of Courted, which is a executive search firm and advisor. Here, this kind of fits right into what BGF is really good at. Sophie Birch, who runs the Talent Network, will attest. We spend a lot of our time talking about talent and talking about recruiting people for boards, for executive jobs, etc. BGF has a large and famous network of executives in the UK and Ireland. And, not to be immodest, but here in the States, our network is also vast and deep. We work together on trying to merge those two things, and so it gives you opportunity. But oftentimes, to be honest, it falls down with the expectations of U.S. executives and how that differs. So we asked Luke to take us through his experiences as a recruiter with the difference between UK and US hiring. And should we go on? Let's go.
And first of all, this one, so looking at CEO compensation from the US versus the UK over the last 5+ years, and you can see, first of all, the US is like 3x, right? 2 to 5x, but I'd say 3x on average. And also it's continuously growing, whereas the UK has been stagnant, a bit up and down. And that kind of sets the tone for the rest of the market, is certainly what we found. And I think, there's another aspect of this, which is actually, if you're a high-performing executive and you're anywhere on the planet, really, you're going to look at the US market and think, that's where I need to be, because that's where I can maximize my earning potential. Compensation factors in the US, from what we've observed, they have a much higher concentration of equity. Equity in the US market tends to make up a large proportion of most compensation packages at the executive level. It's 74 CEOs and executives at exco level generally, which is significantly higher than the UK. You go down to Connecticut and you will see there is a big footprint of European executives who have migrated over to the US, and that continues to be the trend. And I think the reason for that is actually lifestyle. You can technically live a much better lifestyle in the US. And look, the stat at the top, New York-based CEO takes home 7.2 million in expendable income compared to 1.4 million in London, right? This example, and I think there's a few lessons from this. So this happened to us last year. we were working with a client on a global CIO mandate. This is Exco level. They're a $9 billion business. It was a really tough search. It was a global search. We got down to the final 2 candidates, a 9-week process, which is relatively quick. Now, the context here is that actually the US-based candidate in the 2-person shortlist was on $1.5 million total compensation, compared to the UK-based candidate who was on 400K. Logically, where you go, if there's not much between them, then clearly you go for the UK candidate because they are so much cheaper. They chose to hire the US-based candidate on the basis that a lot of the team were here. They felt like having someone who was embedded into the market here would be able to drive outcomes quicker and build the relationships necessary to really get the organization ticking along. The selected candidate, the US candidate, actually got a counter offer. And I remember speaking to the CEO and we were having a conversation. And in the UK, the approach to this is very much, oh, it's not all about the money, it's not all about the money, but the money's definitely a lever, but there's all these other things as well. And I was having this conversation, my normal approach, and the CEO turned around and said, if the offer's better, but the money's not, then it is all about the money. You've got to talk turkey, you've got to be completely direct. And we learned this, and every time we're in this situation from here on forward, we will have a very different approach. We will be completely fact-based, and we will make sure that we ask for the outcome that we're looking for. How do we take that learning and make sure that we embed that into what we're doing day to day? And it's changed the way that we think about, certainly we've got some US-based people here, but the Brits that have moved over, it's changed the way we approach the job.
So there's an awful lot there, but I mean, when you look at this chart, it could be a little bit intimidating, I guess. Certainly, and Sophie, please weigh in. This isn't every situation, but you should be just prepared that if you're going to hire a senior executive in the US, even if they don't have a CEO title, if they're a chief commercial officer or a chief revenue officer, they're going to be expensive. And Sophie, don't you think that this has widened?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I was first made aware of this compensation gap, it's quite stark, right? If we're looking at average of 3 times more in terms of the US exec versus UK, it is quite stark. I think probably where I've got comfortable is around that opportunity. So there's no denying that the expectation in terms of total comp is higher, but I think the opportunity is huge, and it delivers much faster growth if you have those boots on the ground. In the US, lots of people think of it as more of an excess, but I think it's actually it's you committing to the US and saying, you know what, we understand that we absolutely need to pay for US talent, someone who understands the market. And feedback we've had to date is absolutely no one ever regrets paying up, I guess, for those US execs, because it does drive that growth much more quickly.
Right. I mean, I can tell you from my personal experience and just kind of recent personal experience as a board director on a company that we're in the process of recruiting a US executive, you kind of have to shift the internal conversation from, shock, like what, this would be the highest paid person at our company or whatever the conversation is, to looking at it through the proper side of the telescope, as Tom Newman is fond of saying, like, what does it really mean to pay this person? If they're the right person and they deliver, they're going to pay for themselves with one additional deal, say if they're the chief revenue officer, or if it's a technology officer that can help you really create more scalable technology and products in very short order, they'll pay for themselves. And so you have to look at the difference, I think, as just another business expense with an ROI, and take a bit of the emotion out of it, which is sometimes really hard to do when you're looking at this disparity. Now, this chart, to be fair, is public companies. And of course, the S&P 500 has amazing liquidity. And I'm on the board of a publicly traded company in the United States on the New York Stock Exchange. And it's not part of the S&P 500, but it's kind of that second tier. And so most of the CEO compensation is going to be around equity, which is another thing that kind of I spend a lot of time talking about, because it's been my experience that some of the companies that I've worked with, not maybe directly as a board director, but just as an advisor, have missed big opportunities to hire really talented people who go on and do amazing things over this idea of equity. And this is the kind of purpose over pay. The U.S. executives, if they believe that they're on a mission with you and their job is to make your company a huge success in the United States, and that will result in a much higher valuation and equity value, they want a piece of that. And so you really have to think through how you put together your equity packages for U.S. executives, because even at lower levels, people now are used to equity compensation. This is, I think, starting to change, and Sophie, you tell me, but starting to change with UK companies, but it's still, equity is still viewed as something that's available only for the higher echelons. Before we get to,
I don't know what you think of this Atlantic headline. Job market.
It's not too late. I can go back. So, any questions or thoughts about Luke's presentation? Questions? The other thing I'd say is don't use it, don't be intimidated by it. You know, you can always work these things out. And the cash part, I mean, that's the thought of that last slide. If you really get somebody on a mission with you, high potential executive who really is driven, it's not necessarily always about the cash, it's about the mission. So we're going to kind of wind it up with Paul Monk, who's the Chief Strategy Officer of Alpha Development. What Alpha does is they work with financial services businesses to train up their executives. And so one of the things that he has personally made his mission is to understand AI and how it's changing everything. And I would just say I know that it's true in the UK. It's doubly true here in the US, where AI is on everybody's thought. It's gonna, if the last 25 years was about digital transformation, the next 25 years are going to be about AI transformation, and it's probably going to be quicker than that. So we asked Paul to take us through their thinking and how they talk to their customers about AI. And so here is Paul Monk.
So I don't know what you think of this Atlantic headline. The job market is hell. Young people are using ChatGPT to write their applications. HR is using AI to read them. No one's getting hired. Basically, there is some work that these people don't want to do. There's some work that these people don't want to do. And so they're both solving it through AI. You've also just got, and obviously everyone likes a good headline, what I might call kind of cynicism creeping into this. Deloitte in Australia, they wrote a very expensive report for the Australian government, which just had GPT invented references inside, which they then had to refund back. So collapsing through it. So bad, but then I can say this because none of them are in the room. Consultants have been messing stuff up for many, many years, right? This is not a new thing, but all of a sudden, it's headline news. We've gone through the hype. Everyone got ChatGPT on their phone a couple of years ago. And now we're sinking into here because it's not doing exactly what everyone envisaged. So one of these is called composite AI, which is exactly as it sounds. It's just merging different types of AI together. And the other one is called artificial general intelligence, AGI. So this is the kind of full Terminator machines, conscious thought, take over the world type stuff. What Gartner is saying is that composite AI is going to go all the way through this to the plateau of productivity in less than 2 years. So if you're planning your investment or whatever else, you can assume in a couple of years, this is going to be over here in a form that you can use it. AGI, and there's a lot of debate around this, which again, we probably don't have time to get into today. They're saying it's going to take more than 10 years before it becomes practical. How quickly it comes through to a point where we, particularly as relatively small businesses, can actually utilize it is massively variable. The challenge when people are thinking strategically about this in terms of their organization is these tools are on the surface really easy to use. People will go, well, look, I'm already using GPT on my phone. We've now got Copilot in our, office environment. So I know how to use it. The actual human skill of using specifically Gen AI well is something that needs to be practiced and experimented with. You need to make mistakes, you need to learn from them, you need to move forward. One of the real challenges around this is, although we are all humans, people have started thinking that GPT is also human, and it's not. So if you tell ChatGPT or an equivalent, you are an expert in X, and then ask it a question about X, it will give you a better answer, which is nonsense as a human, right? But these things are not human. They require proper work and reskilling and upskilling and experimentation. The second area is think about what Deloitte calls sludge. 2 days out of 5, people are self-reporting, but they're doing work, tasks, activities, and so on that aren't adding value. You know, move away maybe from the world's most innovative, sexy AI, and just what actually can you eliminate from the day-to-day to free up your people? And that mindset shift, I think, is something that's lacking. Everyone's like, well, I do a very technical, difficult job, so I want to get my AI to help me with my technical, difficult job, rather than just what else as an organization can we eliminate? And so being someone who's actually just tinkering, you can't break it, I promise, you can't break Copilot, you can't break ChatGPT, but play around with it, give it a go. That's my time.
Great. I think I'm going to go and spend a minute on this slide just because it's super important. So AI is going to be part of what you encounter when you come here. It is what you're dealing with in your home market as well. And there's a lot of hype, and there are thousands of companies. I mean, I'm sure the same is true in Europe and the UK, but because of the entrepreneurial zeal of the US, the funding behind new companies is just extraordinary. So in this incredible, interesting way to put it, everybody's talking about AI as if it's here now and it's going to have an impact on your business right now. And in many ways, it will. So this early stage of AI, Paul is saying, according to Gartner, will be commonplace, used in every business, et cetera, within the next couple of years, which is incredibly fast for any new technology, certainly faster than web development, mobile development, et cetera. But the kind of I don't know, doomsday versions of AI, maybe sometime in the future. And so you can be a little more deliberate and plan for them. Any questions or thoughts about this or all right. So they're not here, but I want to thank all the folks that contributed to this, including Sophie Day and Katie Sosowski, who have worked on this to put it together. And there's more coming. We had a terrific panel of lawyers from Fenwick, which is a huge law firm here, global law firm based in San Francisco, with also offices in New York. And they talked about the legals, the tax issues, et cetera. We're going to put together a separate recorded session there that we'll make available to BGF's constituents on the Scale Up platform. So more to come. And we do have a couple of minutes if we want to talk about questions, but I think the three takeaways, it's mindset, translate, don't copy, and empower the local team. You're going to have to maybe spend up to get that. And then you can't screw it up fatally here in the United States. So I think adaptation is important. So try, adapt, move on, but be willing to adapt. And then with leadership, I mean, I think both your current leadership has to be here with their presence. And then also there's a ton of better things. The UK does things better than the US, discipline, et cetera. One of the things I think we do a little bit better is boldness and experimentation. If you balance those two things, I think you've got a winning strategy. So thank you very much. Be happy to take any final questions.
Nothing for me. Just want to say thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Very useful and very thought provoking.
Thanks. And all of us are available for follow-up. And, please reach out to Tom, Katie, or myself if you have questions about the US, or obviously Sophie, both Sophies, and Alex, for any questions, if you want an introduction, etc. We have a unique relationship with BGF. As their operating partners, we have a remit to work with portfolio companies, not just the ones we're invested in. And so, we'd be happy to help. All you have to do is give us a call.
Yeah, likewise from me, Mike and team. Yeah, that was really useful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well,
Yeah, thanks, Mike, Tom. That was super useful. And just to reiterate, any further questions, thoughts, please get in contact with us. More than happy to help.
Yep. Shockingly, we're ending on time. All right.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Take
everyone.
care. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye. Thank goodness we took the legal bit out.
Said, didn't I?
Yeah, you did.
Said it was.
We're like, which one? Because the legal one can be one by itself, can't it?
Yeah, that's